Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Matic Explorer Homage. This watch is available from Matic official store on AliExpress for $162. So firstly, let's look at the travel case that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the Matic Explorer Homage comes in this matte black hard shell travel case with a contrasting red zip. I'll show you the interior. So as you can see, there are two foam panels inside, and in one half we have slots in the foam panel for the bracelet to fit around. So I like this style of hard shell travel case, but however it is a disappointment because it's completely sterile. It's unbranded on the interior and the exterior. As you can see, it doesn't say anywhere on it Matic, and for a new watch brand this displays a clear lack of effort, and it's a clear cost-cutting measure. I think it's wholly unacceptable to have an unbranded watch box or travel case, regardless of the price point of the piece. With regards to other items, this is the plastic guarantee card, and as you can see it hasn't been filled in, but I'm pleased to report that the Matic Explorer Homage is covered by a 12-month international guarantee, which is very reassuring. And lastly, one also gets this Matic tag, as you can see, which has the brand emblem embossed, so very aesthetically pleasing. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Matic Explorer Homage. The watch is clearly an homage to the Rolex Explorer 214270, but however it's a different case size. It's 37.3mm case diameter. It has a 46.5mm lug-to-lug measurement, a thickness of 12.3mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The oyster style bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to the flip-lock clasp. The flip-lock clasp is sterile, it's unsigned, and again this is another clear cost-cutting measure. It should be engraved with Matic, and I really dislike sterile clasps because it's evidence that they have cut corners with regards to the finishing of the clasp. Mirror polish to the flanks, brush satin finish to the top side and underside, as one would expect. Now, the clasp is the main negative of this piece. There are several defects with this clasp. The first one is this end of the clasp is razor sharp. It's dangerously sharp, and it also has dangerously sharp points, so it's very poorly finished. The other problem is the flip lock execution, which I'll show you. Now, there's too much play in it. If you look at the flip lock, it wobbles both laterally and also side to side, as you can see. So this means that it doesn't latch securely with a positive click on the body of the clasp, and it's significant. As you can see, very sloppy fit to the flip lock. Now that's compounded by the other half of the body of the clasp. As you can see, there is significant wobble both up and down and lateral side to side play in every direction. And the problem is when one closes the body of the flip lock, it doesn't latch. It doesn't snap shut. There's no positive click. The only way you can get this to click shut, as you would expect, is to fold over the sloppy flip lock, and then there's so much pressure on the flip lock it actually forces it down, but it still isn't clicked, it's not engaged. If I open the flip lock, it pops open. So this is a very poorly executed flip lock clasp, and this is actually worse quality than I would see on a Pagani Design PD1664, for example, or a PD1661. The flip lock clasp that Pagani Design uses is actually better executed. The pins are tighter, there's less play in it, and one thing it does do is snap shut every time. So as you can see, if I press it repeatedly, it's not engaging. Underneath we have a tooth, which is meant to engage in the latch on the other side, as you can see, but when I press it down, it just doesn't click down. The only way one can get it to click down is pushing over the flip lock and pressing the flip lock down firmly, and that forces it to click down. Very poorly executed. Now, that's not the end of it. I'll show you something else, which is the worst thing of all. There's no glide lock mechanism, which is fair enough. They've put a 5mm Easy Link type extension, and as you can see, it's neither deployed or neither clicked into the clasp. It's neither one thing or the other. I can't get this Easy Link type extension to deploy. I can't get it to click out of the body of the clasp, and I've really tried. Believe me, when I say I've pressed it and pressed it and pressed it, it just doesn't click out. It's stuck permanently. But it's not stuck in, it's actually stuck halfway, which is even worse, because as you can see, it's not stuck into the clasp, it looks like it's halfway to being deployed. And I can't press it back in, that's the point. It's actually stuck in both directions. I can't press it back in to click it in, and I can't pull it back out to deploy either. It's actually permanently stuck in this halfway position. So really disappointing, and I've really persevered with it. I've pressed it and pressed it and pressed it, and it just isn't going to deploy, and it certainly isn't going to click back in. So this is the worst executed flip block clasp I have ever reviewed on my channel. It's just dreadful. Everything about it. It's an example of how to make a flip block clasp badly. So I'll just close it using the flip block, as you can see. So it's razor sharp on the edge, 2 sharp points. The Easy Link extension doesn't deploy. It doesn't click shut, and just throughout there's too much play and wobble in the pins. With regards to the rest of the specification, we have a flat sapphire crystal with clear AR coating on the underside. And the clear AR coating does a good job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the applied indices, the applied Arabic numerals at 9, 6 and 3, and the silver Mercedes hands. So it's good to get AR coating at this price point. The flat sapphire crystal is aesthetically pleasing. It has a nice lip which projects above the mirror polished 316L grade stainless steel bezel. Quality of the mirror polishing on the bezel is good. Quality of the mirror polishing on the flanks to the case is also good. Brushed satin finish to the tops of the lugs is also done to a good standard. Now, with regards to the end links and the bracelets, the end links are a poor fit to the head of the piece. As you can see, there's a groove either side. They don't fit flush. They are meant to fit flush. This is meant to be an homage to the Rolex Explorer. And as you can see on both sides, there's a lip on the edge of the case. The lugs project proud of the end link of the bracelet. So it's like the end links are made for a different case. They're not made to fit the head of the piece. It's the same on both sides. As you can see, there's an edge to the tops of the lugs. So the end links are a poor fit to the case. And that isn't the end of it. If you look at the end link in the oyster style bracelet, it has significant play. Now there's gaps in between the links and in the 3 links of the oyster style bracelet, but the pins going through the end links themselves are a very sloppy fit. If you look, there is significant play, both side to side lateral play and also up and down play. As you can see, if you look closely there, just look at the gap between the end link and the 2 outer links of the oyster bracelet. That is significant, and it's wholly unacceptable. This is the kind of poor quality control, poor build quality and bracelet execution one would expect to see on a Pagani design costing circa $70 US. But this is $162 US. It's not a €70 or $70 US Pagani design, so it's wholly unacceptable. The bracelet has play in every single one of the pins. As you can see, they're screw pins, not push pins. And as you can see, this is one of the most sloppy bracelets I've ever seen on my channel. And I've reviewed over 150 watches, and it's absolutely dreadful. So it has lateral side-to-side play in the screw pins and also up and down play. And the cumulative effect of every single pin in the bracelet having play is it rattles. It makes an annoying rattling sound. And the worst of all is the end link fit, as you can see, because it plays up and down, side to side. And you just look at the gap in between the center links in the oyster style bracelet and the outer links. When I flex it, it actually opens up. So it's a very rattly bracelet. And can you imagine wearing this, a rattly bracelet like this, with a dreadful, abhorrent clasp like this, with the razor sharp edge, doesn't snap shut, the Easy Link style extension doesn't deploy. Everything about this bracelet and clasp is dreadful. So the quality of the brushed satin finishing on the top side and underside is acceptable. The quality of the mirror polishing on the flanks is acceptable. But the execution, the build quality, the quality control are the worst I have seen. So the head of the piece is well finished. The bracelet is dreadful, and really it's a throwaway bracelet. So I'll show you the case back. Screw down stainless steel case back. It's an exhibition case back glazed with sapphire crystal. Now, credit where credit's due, the screw down exhibition case back is finished to a good standard. Coin edge finishing to the circumference and brushed satin finishing to the exterior of it. So it's a very aesthetically pleasing sapphire crystal glazed exhibition case back, and it does a good job of displaying the movement used, which is the Seiko NH38 automatic. So it's good that they've used the sapphire crystal glazed exhibition caseback rather than mineral crystal, which is a cost-cutting measure that many low-tier brands use. It's flat and perfectly smooth, so it fits well against the wrist. It's comfortable to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. With regards to the end links, they are very rough. They're poorly machined and poorly finished, badly deburred around the spring bar area, and the actual quality of the milling, the machining to the underside of the end links is very rough finish. So there's room for improvement with regards to the quality of the finishing to the end links. They are very poor quality. So I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now I haven't sized the bracelet. I've simply taken the watch out of the travel case, and as you can see, when I press it with my thumb, and you can take my word for it, I'm pressing it very hard, it just doesn't engage. And it doesn't matter how hard you press it or how many times you press it, it's never going to click shut. This is wholly unacceptable. So as I've discussed, the only way I can get this to close is to firmly press the flip lock, and that forces it down, but it shouldn't be like that. It's dreadful. So the luster to the 316L grade stainless steel on the oyster style bracelet is nice to look at, as is the luster on the 316L grade flip lock clasp. As you can see, the taper of the bracelet is correct from 20mm at the lugs down to the abhorrent flip lock clasp. So they've got the proportions correct. This is a 37.3mm head of the piece, and the 20mm lug width does balance it. But however, the proportions of the head of the piece are off. It looks too long. If you look at the proportions of the case, it looks like a very long case on wrist because it's 46.5mm long, but it's only a 37.3mm diameter case. They've actually got the proportions incorrect. They should have shortened the lug-to-lug measurement and increased the diameter of the case to 38 or 39mm to better balance it. Now, as you can see on wrist, it does look aesthetically pleasing. The matte white dial does complement the silver applied indices and the silver Arabic numerals, also the Mercedes hands. I like the applied Matic brand emblem at 12 o'clock. As you can see, it catches the light, and the clear AR coating does do a good job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature. Now, it is a tall piece. It's 12.3mm. Now, bear in mind, this is only a 37.3mm head of the piece. They should have got the thickness of this piece, even with the exhibition case back, down to below 12mm. It should be 11.5 to 12. At 12.3, it doesn't sit flat on my wrist. If you look, the exhibition case back, the profile of it is like a bubble back case back, and the problem is it creates a gap underneath the case at both ends. So it wobbles on my wrist. It feels like it's sitting on my wrist rather than wrapping around it. So poor fit. This is compounded by the use of male end links, as you can see, and they extend the overall length, the effective lug-to-lug measurement, from 46.5mm, which is the case, to over 48mm, because we have to take into account the long male end link. So the end links are a poor fit to the case, as I've shown you, but they also are too long. They make the oyster bracelet project proud, and you get this unsightly gap underneath the case, as you can see, and it's on both sides. If I turn my wrist this way, you can see there's also a gap there. Had they used female pivoted end links, it would have solved the problem, and it would have given a better fit, because this end link in the oyster bracelet would be pulled snug to the wrist, and therefore the case would also be pulled tighter down to the wrist. It's very badly proportioned, so they've really made a mistake with regards to the lug-to-lug measurement being too long and the diameter of the case being too small. Also, it's too tall at 12.3, and I'll show you exactly what the problem is. It's not the screw-down exhibition case back. They've made a critical error with regards to the rehorts, and I'm going to describe exactly what it is. Now, if you look closely through the sapphire crystal, look how thick the stainless steel rehort is underneath the crystal. Look at the depth. The dial is sunken too deep underneath the sapphire crystal. They've used a really thick rehort, and this is a Seiko NH38 powered piece. There is no reason to use such a thick rehort. It would be beneficial, if anything, to use a very slim rehort, because that would improve the legibility. When one uses a shallow rehort, a thin rehort, it has the effect of bringing the sapphire crystal closer to the dial and hands, and that reduces the glare, it reduces the reflection of the light. But by having a very thick rehort, it acts like a mirror. And if you look, the light bounces around the brushed satin finish rehort like a mirror, and that makes the light bounce off the indices and also the Mercedes hands. So although it's got clear AR coating, the clear AR coating is constantly trying to reduce the effect of having this massive rehort. Now, there's something else which is abhorrent. If you look at the piece straight on, the rehort isn't straight, it's not parallel, it's tapered. And it starts off large at the sapphire crystal, and then it gradually tapers down to the dial, which should be 28.5mm because it's a standard Seiko NH38 dial diameter. And And what they've done is they've used this really thick rehort. And when I say thick, I mean in terms of depth, but also thick in terms of diameter, because it's got a huge taper. If you look, it's significantly wider at the sapphire crystal, and then it quickly gets smaller going down to the dial. So rather than using a straight rehort, they've compounded the problem of using a deep rehort by also making it massively tapered. It's just dreadful, and the problem with it is they have significantly increased the thickness of the bezel. As you can see, the bezel looks out of proportion. It's a too thick bezel. This is the kind of bezel one would expect to see on a 39 or a 40mm piece. This is 37.3. The bezel is out of proportion. So the overall thickness has now been increased to 12.3 because they've used a rehort which is 1 to 1.5mm too thick. So dreadful design. Right, so let's test the crown action. Coin edge finish, solid stainless steel crown made from 316L grade stainless steel, mirror polished dome cap. It's sterile, unsigned, another clear cost cutting measure. It should be signed with Matic. So again, we've got cost cutting measure after cost cutting measure, and it really is a disappointment not to have a signed crown. This is $162. We're not talking about a $70 Pagani design, and even that has a signed crown. So let's test the action. Good foam resistance to it, and it is reasonably smooth. So I would describe it as acceptable, but however it's not silky smooth. In the first position, it's the manual wind position. Now, one benefit of using the NH38 rather than the NH35A is there is no date complication, so there's no phantom date wheel setting position. In the first position, it's the manual wind position, and one can manually wind the NH38 to top it up to its maximum 40-hour power reserve, and it's an absolute pleasure to manually wind the NH38. Pulling it out to the first click is the only click on the winding stem, and that is the time setting position. Good foam resistance to the NH38. It feels exactly the same as the NH35A. The architecture of the two movements is the same. The only difference between the NH38 and the NH35A is the date complication is absent on the 38. So absolute pleasure to set the time. It has hacking, as you can see. I've now hacked the second hand. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, which restarts the movement, as you can see. So I'll test screwing it back down. Now it doesn't feel silky smooth. There is some resistance. The thread feels slightly gritty, and that's a disappointment. Now it does screw down okay, but it's not one of the better screw down crowns I've experienced. And it does take a lot of force. One has to really push in the winding stem to get the threads to pick up. So there is room for improvement on it. I would describe it as acceptable. But for example, it's not as silky smooth as on a Pagani design. I'm often critical of Pagani design watches. But one thing they do get correct, Pagani design make a very good quality screw down crown, and they always interface very well. The internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the crown tube mesh very well. So I do always criticise their shortcomings, but one thing I don't criticise with Pagani design is their crown execution. This crown just isn't as good as a Pagani design. That's the reality of it. Right, so let's do a Lume test, and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to its absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it uses BGW9 Super Nova. On the Mercedes hands, it's glowing brightly, and it will continue to glow for a good length of time. So they've used several layers of BGW9 on the Mercedes hands, and I like the Lume dots on the sweeping second hand, very good. However, on the applied indices and the large Arabic numerals, which are also applied at 9, 6 and 3, they have used BGW9, but it's clear that they haven't applied enough layers of BGW9, because if you look at the applied indices and the Arabic numerals, they are beginning to fade a lot faster than on the Mercedes hands. The Mercedes hands are glowing very brightly, as one would expect with BGW9 Super Nova. They just have done a very bad job of applying the Lume on the dial. And really, this is wholly unacceptable, because we're talking about $162. And if you're going to use BGW9 Super Nova, you need to apply 5 or 6 layers of it minimum on the applied indices and on the large Arabic numerals in order for it to be bright and match the brightness of the Mercedes hands. They've got it right on the Mercedes hands. This is how it should look. If you look closely at the Mercedes hands, this is what BGW9 Super Nova looks like when it has 5 or 6 layers plus. On the dial, That's what it looks like when it's had 1, 2 or 3 layers of BGW9. It's not enough. It needs 5 or 6 layers. Of course, it costs more to do that. It's more time consuming and therefore production costs are higher. It's a clear cost-cutting measure when they use BGW9 on the dial, but they only put 3 layers on instead of 6, and that's exactly what's happened here. They fully loomed the hands correctly, but they haven't loomed the dial. Now, if you look closely at the dial, the applied indices, and the Arabic numerals, it's fading to nothing and fading fast. So this is a real disappointment, because when I read the specification I thought this is loaded. Clear AR coating on the sapphire crystal in the exhibition caseback. I thought this is looking very good. BGW9, I thought fantastic. Looking at it in the flesh, you can see now, look at the dial, fading to nothing. So very disappointing, and it's a real shame because it had the potential. Using BGW9, they just cut corners with regards to not applying 6 layers of it, which is the industry standard. So let's discuss the movement used, because it is one of my favourite aspects of the piece. The Seiko NH38, you'll all be familiar with it. The architecture of the NH38 is the same as the NH35A, which you will all be familiar with. The only difference is that it has no date complication. 24 joules, it runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. It has hand binding and hacking, which use for complications, and the stated accuracy of the NH38 is -20 to +40 seconds per day. So a rather wide accuracy range, but however I'm pleased to report that this one has been well regulated and it's running consistently at +10 seconds per day, which isn't impressive, but it is well within the -20 to +40 second per day stated accuracy. +10 seconds per day is acceptable, but however I would prefer to see the movement regulated to a better accuracy of ±5 seconds per day, for example, because the NH38, it is possible to regulate it in 5 positions to ±5 seconds per day typically. +10 seconds per day really isn't very good regulation. So lastly, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So the price point of this Matic Explorer Homage is $162 US. I consider this to be poor quality, and I consider it to be poor value at $162 US. Now, I'm going to justify that. I recently reviewed a Bliger PA21 Explorer, which is a similar price point piece. It's actually less expensive at $130 US. That had a PT5000, which is a higher grade of movement than the NH38. But the other thing it had was a glide lock style clasp, as opposed to using a flip lock style clasp with an EasyLink style extension. Now, as you'll know from that Bliger PA21 Explorer review, the glide lock mechanism worked very well, and I was very impressed with it. Now, it wasn't as smooth as on a Rolex, it wasn't as good as my Rolex Submariner, but one isn't going to get that at $130 US. One has to be realistic. But however, credit where credit's due, the Bliger PA21 does have a good glide lock style mechanism, and it did work. It clicked in and out, and I was able to get on the fly adjustment, and I was actually very pleased with it. The other thing I was pleased with was the PT5000, because it is a good quality movement, and Bliger deserve credit because they were producing it at only $130 US. So in comparison, I'm weighing up this piece at $162 US with that Bliger PA21, because it also uses BGW9 Superluminova. The difference is, in the Lume test, I demonstrated that the Bliger had several layers on the applied indices and the Arabic numerals. It glowed brightly and it continued to glow for a good length of time. That is what 5 or 6 layers plus of BGW9 look like. So I regard this as poor quality, and I regard it as poor value. I regard the Bliger in comparison to be excellent quality and excellent value, which is why I declared it as a champagne watch for lemonade money. There are too many shortcomings with this watch. The lume on the dial is a disappointment. The play in the end links, the play in the bracelet throughout, razor sharp edge, 2 sharp points, EasyLink style extension doesn't deploy, clasp doesn't click shut. These are fundamentals that a watch brand has to get correct. Even Pagani Design, with all their quality control issues, they get the flip lock clasp right every time. It clicks shut correctly, the EasyLink extension works correctly. These are fundamentals. As bad as Pagani Design is with quality control, if they can get it right at $70 US, there is no excuse for Matic not to get it correct at $162 US. That is $92 US more expensive, wholly unacceptable. So I cannot recommend this piece to you. I'm going to say avoid buying this piece. If you are looking for a good quality Rolex Explorer Homage, the Blyger PA21 cannot be beaten. It's got a higher grade of movement, BGW9, most importantly a glide lock style clasp, which is good. I recommend the Blyger PA21. I do not recommend this Matic. So I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Matic Explorer Homage. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.